Hello and welcome to the next tutorial in my Android Unity plugin series. This time we'll add a functionality that will allow you to show a native alert view from within Unity. Once again, we will use Android Studio to modify and build our Java code and run it in the emulator. This tutorial assumes a reasonable working knowledge of Unity, Android, Java and C#. Either complete the previous tutorial or download the code for the previous plugin so you can follow along. Let's open the plugin code in Android Studio. We're going to need to reference the Unity activity. We will get the actual value in our C# code, but for now, let's create a variable public static activity main activity to hold the value the plugin will use. We also want to define an interface that will be hooked up to a C# function. This function will be called when the dialog detects a button tap. Add a public method void showAlertView that will take a string array and a reference to our callback method. Check to make sure we've got at least 3 strings in our array. If not, output an error message and return. We're going to define a dialog interface on click listener that will be used for each of the buttons in the alert view. This will simply dismiss the alert and then pass the ID of the button tapped back to our callback function. Create the actual alert dialog with alertDialog.builder, passing in the main Unity activity. Use the first string as a title and the second string as a message. And finally, mark the dialog as non-cancelable. This means the dialog will be completely modal and wait for the user to tap a button before dismissing. Add the third string as a caption for a neutral button. If we have 4 strings, then we'll add another button using the 4th string as a caption for our negative button. If we have 5 strings, then use the 5th string as a caption for a positive button. With our alert view complete, we can now show it. That completes the modifications to our Java code. Click the green play arrow to execute the copy plugin task in our Gradle file. As before, this will build a plugin and then copy it forward to the Unity project. Now you can switch back to Unity. Open the plugin test script in Visual Studio for editing. We need to create a subclass, which we will call AlertView Callback, and it will use Android Java Proxy as its base. This class will be used to encapsulate our callback method, and we will pass an instance of this class to the Java showAlertView function. Add a private variable of type systemActionInt. We will use this to call back to a generic C# function with the ID of the button tapped. Define the constructor to expect a reference to a function with one int as a parameter. This constructor will call into our base class, Android Java Proxy, with a string that defines the interface we declared in our Java code. We'll use the naming convention used by Java to specify the interface. We'll store the past function reference in our class variable for later use. Add a public method, onButtonTapped, that expects a single int as a parameter. This matches the signature and name of the method declared in our Java interface. Let's print the ID of the button tapped, and if the alert handler is not null, pass that ID to the referenced alert handler function. In the static plugin class getter, we'll fetch and store the Unity activity. Do this by getting a reference to the Unity's player class, get a reference to the activity by getting the static value current activity from the Unity player class. Store that reference in our plugin's static copy. Add a C# function that will display our alert view dialog when we call it. It will expect an array of strings and a reference to a function that accepts a single int as a parameter. This will default to null if we don't actually pass a reference. Do a check to make sure we have at least 3 strings in the array. Also check to make sure we're actually running on the Android platform. Then call into our plugin instance showAlertView function. Pass all the parameters as an array of objects. Finally, in the update function, add a check for a mouse button down. If it occurs, then call our showAlertDialog method. In this case, we're passing an array of 4 strings and a lambda function as our local handler. Save the changes and switch back to Unity. Wait a few seconds while Unity builds the code, and then tap Command B to build the Android version. Switch back to Android Studio and the logcat view. The filter should be set to Unity bar CWG tech, or your own string if you modified the log tag variable. With the app running in the emulator, tap the screen. You'll see the alert view pop up. As we set it to non-cancelable, tapping anywhere on the screen or the back button will have no effect. Tap a button and you'll see the alert view dismissed and the debug output appear in logcat showing the ID of the button tapped. That completes our tutorial. This time I showed you how to add an alert view dialog to the plugin and how to call back to a C# function when one of the buttons is tapped. Hopefully you find this useful and were able to learn something from it. Join me next time as we look at a share function that will allow you to share screenshots from your Unity application using the built-in Android share intent. As always, I appreciate your comments and feedback. Follow me on Twitter @CWGTech.